what you were mentioning is we call it the game.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like
right, yeah.
the game of life. It's like we all know, like there's like the ideal truth of the game,
Yes.
which is like loving your neighbor and like doing this objective. Like we all know what goodness is, even if you don't believe if an objective or not. We believe in what we know. What's good. We know what feels.
I just really like that your definition of goodness happens to be what Christians call good.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It's
We could do. What do you think goodness is?
well, the issue is that if you go back to earlier in the podcast, it's what my mum told it. Was don't push people to go on the slide. That's what being good means. What if we lived in a society where you had to push people?
That's what I'm
What
saying.
if
It's
you
like
lived in push people slide society.
Hitler
Minecraft
thought a lot
video.
of things he was doing was good.
Yeah, of course. That's right.
I don't think it was good at all. But
Yes, the hedge. That is a disclaimer. He does not agree.
you have to ask why.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, that's a pin of philosophy of like morality. But when it comes to the goodness of the ideal game, right?
Yes.
It's like it's almost like in life you don't win if you do that.
Well, okay, I think what you're trying to say is that in an ideal society, we would live in like
Pure meritocracy.
meritocracy, yeah, like Plato's like ideal idea of utopia. You know, the person that governs us should be a philosopher king. He should be wholly good and benevolent. What that means is that he should be
Not malevolence.
Okay, but the idea is that we want someone who is ideally the most worthy of the station, who loves doing the right thing, will stop at nothing to find out what the right thing is. He has absolute power, or she also has absolute power to be able to do that as well. It's this sort of idealized person. Like, wouldn't you want to be ruled by that person?
But this is the thing is, right? It's like J.K. Chesterton. We can all agree on what's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
Is it G.K.? Sorry. G.K. Chesterton. So we can all agree on what's wrong with the world, but we struggle to agree with what's right.
That's right,
So it's like we all want the right thing in power, but it's like you've got Hitler over here.
Yeah.
And then you've got, it's like, well,
Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius, or you've got like, I don't know, who's wise, Solomon, that guy. You got all these people that was like, this is right. It's like, well, we can never agree. We all know what's wrong. It's like, we don't want that.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what I find challenging. And I think if it was that simple, we would have an answer.
Let's use an example from G.K. Chesterton to kind of point out what that means to someone watching. So let's say that you're a doctor, right? And you are a part of a multidisciplinary team where, there's a bunch of different doctors and other medical professionals around you. And the presenting concern of the patient is, I don't have an arm. I am not whole. I'm not healthy, right? Fun fact, the word healthy comes from whole. I could get into the etymology of that, but that's a different story. But he's not whole, so he's not healthy, right? We know that he's not whole because he's missing an arm. He's got a hole in his arm. And the question I pose to you is, what is the right way of healing him? What do you do? What is, and this is the metaphor for like what is good, what is right to do. We can all agree what's wrong. He's missing an arm. And that isn't to say that people who don't have arms or other limbs or any kind of like part of their body are in the wrong. But ideally, you would be able to function to the level that society is built for you, which is this expectation that you should have two arms, right? And as a doctor, it's your responsibility to get people back to wholeness. So what do? You know what's wrong. What do? Do you give them a cybernetic prosthetic arm? Unfortunately, the research shows that after about 3 to 6 months, people with prosthetics don't like them anymore because they've learned to just use one arm. Their satisfaction, here's what happens. They report that, yes, I'm incredibly satisfied with my new arm because, it's novel. It's like, look at all the things I can do. And then they realize it's not the best. It's actually kind of like bulky.
Same thing.
So the satisfaction like kind of like goes down to like what they were at. So lower than what they were at when they only had one arm. So that's not the answer. What do? Well, maybe we just say, well, you live with it, mate. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can just keep coming up with answers. I'm sure you've got your own interpretation as well, but we can all agree with what's wrong. We can't agree with what's right. There's a real world example of what is meant by that, right? And now we can just generalize that and go, what about good? What's the good thing to do? My opinion is different to yours, right? Why is my opinion different to yours, do you think, as well? What factors play into it? Upbringing, I already touched on that.
Yeah, I think upbringing and obviously worldview.
Well, what goes into your worldview?
What goes into your worldview? I'd feel
What
like
makes up your worldview?
the prompting of others around you, your environment,
your society, your family, because then you have to consider that factor as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out. It's like when it comes to objective truth, because like I struggle with the idea of moral relativity.
Sure.
It's like if you think giving to a homeless man is good and I think hitting a homeless man is good, you have to look at the evidence and go, which one's more reliable and why? Because if you have a framework of like a Darwinian, Darwinian perspective, it's like that can, like when you put it down to the practical thing of like, this guy's got one arm, it's like, what is it? A utilitarian would say, let's harvest the organs and save 4 other people. It's like,
right, but that sort of outlook is completely devoid of any humanity.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is like, I agree with you. But then I'd be like, well, and then you can go like, okay, here more 100 people to save. Or like 1,000 people. It's like, where do you draw the line with like
is it, this is the trolley problem.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So it's like, you have that idea, but then if I believe I should treat other humans with integrity because they are made in the image of God himself, right? If that's a claim that I'm making, obviously that's hard to uphold, right? But let's say that is true. That's one idea. But if I say, oh, no, like I feel like everyone has to have some sort of bedrock foundation in which that they live their life out with. Like, would you agree?
100%.
Like, you have to have a foundation, right?
Here's the issue. So this, and I think it can tie back into like why something like utilitarianism is always like, it seems like it's missing something. When I present to you my own sort of moral compass, right? Like my set of values, I lay them out. I don't pull any punches. I tell you everything that I believe in. The issue is that by the nature of communication, I'm going to have done what we said earlier, where I chose the best words. That's not all the words. I just chose the best ones to represent 80% of what it is that I want to say, leaving the rest of the 20% unsaid, letting you fill in the blanks yourself and interpreting the meaning of my words in the way that you understand them, in the way that your mum told you what they meant, right? So inherently, in transferring my ideas to you, I'm cutting corners. I'm hoping that you understand what I'm even saying when I cut corners, and then you're reinterpreting it all, right? I can't actually tell you everything that I believe in. And in fact, what I believe in seems to change every single day. You know, it's true. We have a pendulum. Like, I believe one day this is good, one day that's bad. And maybe it's just an idiosyncratic thing with me, but I couldn't like tell you exactly how I feel about something. Like, if you ask me a very complicated question, like, let's just say that I never heard of the trolley problem. And you say, give me a response right now. Tell me what the answer is. I'll blurt it out. Like you're metaphorically torturing me by putting pressure on me. And I'm like, I need to respond. But maybe I've never even really thought about it. And I just need time to think. Like, you know, like things can take time. And that's the same thing with my values. Like I can tell you that, like, you know.
But that in and of itself is just, this is a bit of a stretch, but like agnosticism, right? It's like, I'm not sure what is good and what is bad, but I'm on the path to figuring that out.
Yeah,
because atheism would be like, nah, it's all relative. Cynicism. Would you agree that that's? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, because obviously you're like, I don't know what's good, I don't know what's bad. There's like swinging between the two. You're not saying that there is no such thing as goodness, because that's what a hardcore atheist.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Sorry, I shouldn't have cut you off. Keep talking.
That's okay.
I was going to say, like, it sounded to me like what you're asking is what Wittgenstein in Tractatus Logico Philosophicus argues that a lot of people tend to do when they get into philosophy, which is we're just kind of arguing about definitions.
Of course.
Right? And who cares? Who cares what the definition is? We want to talk about what, going back to what I said earlier, what the criteria on the rubric actually represents. What qualities does it represent? When we say words like goodness or agnosticism, what are we actually talking about? I'm not asking like, you know, goodness is hard because it's such a generalized, but like, yeah.
The reason why I'm asking is like, if hypothetically there is objective goodness,
sure,
right?
And we'll assume there is,
right?
The
it's
golden morality, the platonic idealism.
Because like, I completely understand with the 80%, like you zip file corruption.
Yeah.
If it's objective, it doesn't matter how we communicate that because it's objective. It's like it's outside of us.
Yes.
It's the transcendental idealism.
Perfect.
Right?
That's the exact answer I was going to give you.
But it's almost like, because what you're saying is it's all about descriptions, right?
Yeah.
And the whole problem with that is we're describing perfection through imperfective mediums.
What is perfection in the first place? Okay, so here's the issue. Okay, so if we take what you were just saying and extend it, essentially what you were saying is that we can't exactly pin something down in reality through our language because it's not reality. Mm-hmm. The 9th book of Plato's Republic, he asked the question, is it right to have artists in a utopia? And he says no. The answer is no, and this is why. Who do you trust more on the nature of saddles? The artist who has spent thousands of hours depicting every kind of saddle there is in every single way that can be drawn on a canvas or chiseled out of marble, or the man who has spent his entire life making saddles, right? You got both of them in a room and you ask them a question about saddles. Who knows more?
Well, probably if it's about saddles.
Yeah.
Saddle guy.
Exactly right, right? So why have artists in an ideal utopia, right? They're depicting a lie inherently because they don't know enough about saddles. Right? This isn't so that I dislike art, okay? But this is sort of what he means. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying just then. We shouldn't talk about representations of things. We should talk about the thing itself. Words, when we exchange them, are just representations of reality. You and me can argue about how well this camera is filming, right? Let's say something goes wrong, right? And we sit on this couch and we go, nah, it's run out of memory, or nah, it's run out of charge, or whatever else problem it is. Why don't we just go investigate the thing and actually look at it, like hands-on? That's what we should be doing ideally, right? And when we look at the difference between the representation of something, which is a word, and the thing itself, we really don't need to bother with the representation. So when it comes down to your question of what is perfection, right? What is the ideal good? The ideal good cannot be represented in words. It can only be observed in reality, right? And here's an issue. Just my final conclusion on this is that we cannot observe perfection because no one is whole. Right? Everyone is missing a proverbial arm, right? So when I see 100 people in a room, one's missing a toe, one's missing an ear, one's missing a nostril, like that kind of thing, right?
The metaphysical part of them.
Yeah, that's right. They're not actually physically necessarily missing that, but there's something wrong with them. They haven't typically, I think your camera's about to go flat.
Okay.
Let me just finish this thought. Sorry.
That's good.
What it is that I will turn around, and when I try to remember what the average person in the room looked like, I combine them all into one thing. And because Jane was missing an eye and Jim was missing a nose, I'll ignore that and I'll say that on average, everyone in that room was whole. And that's perfection. That's what perfection is. It's this generalized idea. And why can't we find that in reality? It's because it isn't real. It's because it wasn't the person that you met in the room.
I love that. And now, obviously, we can talk about it from a literalist perspective, or we can talk about from a Jordan Peterson metaphorical Jungian perspective. And I think that's why I'm a theist, really. It's because if there was someone that claimed to be whole, that would be the person you want to look up to.
Yeah.
And some people put that idea, like that bedrock we're talking about in Marcus Aurelius. Like, wow, look how... We can talk about that was probably forged or like... put in over time.
It's a palimpsest.
Yeah, but it's like if someone is claiming to be that whole, obviously that is the place of religion. There's more people that are claiming to be that whole.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
And that's the tricky part with if you take the step of faith and believe that there is objective truth, that's a dangerous game. Like you're now in the agnostic game where you're like, I'm on the pursuit for finding the objective truth. And what does that look like? And I feel like people put their faith, religious word, but put their gaze of the ideal, or like imagine this, right? Hakeem made the perfect analogy of the one-armed man, right? Let's just say you look around and everyone's got a piece of them missing.
Yeah.
And then you look at someone else and go, oh, they've got a little bit less of a piece missing.
Yeah.
And then look at someone else, they've got a little bit less of a piece missing. You're kind of searching for the thing or the idea that has the least amount of things missing. And then lo and behold, there is someone that has nothing missing, claims to have nothing missing, comes for the lowest of the low, and then lives a life that we can't live because we have things missing.
Yeah.
And then that in an essence is what the gospel is.
Yeah.
And if you want to look at it from a a literal perspective, or from like an idealistic perspective, I need to put my gaze or my orientation to the most whole, and from that place I can become the most whole.
Right. That's exactly right.
I feel like that is what pursuit of truth looks like on 100%. A biblical, also psychological perspective. It's like, if you want to be good, orientate yourself to the most good. And some say, well, Lewis, if it's relative, it's all hard. But if it isn't, like, if there is no God or if there is no objectivity, then you're right. Everything is relative. It's like Hitler can do what he wants. Like, there's no, like, it's fine because he says it's good, so it's good. But we all know there's a conscience in all of us. I think we all agree that it's wrong, but we just don't.
That's exactly right.
This is another analogy that Alex O'Connor, I'll finish on this. He says, he's like, new atheism, how do you define it? Someone asked him, what is new atheism? And he's like, well, I feel like it's like pornography. It's like, we all know what it is when we see it, but it's quite hard to draw boundaries around it. If I say, we all know what pain is, but we can't quite draw it perfectly, which goes to the 80%, 20%. We all know 80% of it, but 20% kind of goes over. When you see it, you kind of know that it's real, or it's the thing that you're talking about.